Every year in America, thousands of betrayals happen. But mine was worse than I ever imagined. I'm Isabella Carter. My husband cheated with my best friend. And together, they stole $150,000 from my family business. This is how I exposed them. I used to believe my marriage was unshakable. Ethan, my husband, was admired by everyone around us, friends, colleagues, even my own family. And Chloe, my best friend since college, was the sister I never had. Together, the three of us seemed inseparable. To outsiders, my life looked like a fairy tale. But fairy tales can shatter in an instant. One night, Ethan's phone buzzed while he was in the shower. Normally, I never touched his phone. But that night, something inside me pushed me to look. A small, innocent vibration became the trigger for the darkest chapter of my life. When I unlocked the screen, I saw Chloe's name. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless, maybe work, maybe something casual. But as I scrolled through the messages, my blood ran cold. The texts weren't innocent. They were filled with inside jokes, late-night confessions, and words I never thought I'd see exchanged between my husband and my best friend. Words of longing, of passion, words meant for lovers, not friends. I felt my chest tighten as the truth sank in. The man I trusted with my heart and the woman I trusted with my secrets had been betraying me together. My hands shook as I dug deeper, swiping through photos, hotel receipts, private bookings, even plans for our future, written as though I didn't exist. That night, sitting on the edge of my bed with Ethan asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and felt my world collapse. But unlike what they must have expected, I didn't scream, I didn't cry in front of them, I didn't confront either of them right away. I swallowed my pain and forced myself to think. Rage boiled in my veins, but clarity cut through it. If I confronted them immediately, they would twist it, deny it, make me look crazy. But if I waited, if I planned, I could make sure they paid for everything they had stolen. Not just my marriage, but my dignity. That night, I made myself a promise. I, Isabella Carter, would not be their victim. They had no idea what storm was about to come their way. For the next few days, I lived two different lives. In front of Ethan and Chloe, I pretended to be the same smiling, trusting wife and friend. But the moment I was alone, I became someone else entirely, cold, calculating, and determined. At first, I thought their betrayal was only personal. But as I dug deeper, I realized it went much further. Ethan wasn't just cheating on me. He was plotting to rob me blind. I started by quietly checking the family business accounts. My father had worked his entire life to build the company, and after his passing, entrusted me with managing it. Ethan had access to certain records as my husband, but it wasn't supposed to go beyond that. What I found made my stomach churn. There were large transfers I hadn't approved, payments labeled as consulting fees to companies I didn't recognize. Curious, I traced the accounts and discovered they all led back to Chloe. My so-called best friend had set up fake businesses and Ethan was funneling money into them. The betrayal suddenly wasn't just about love. It was about greed, about stripping me of the one thing my father had left behind. Ethan and Chloe weren't satisfied with sneaking around behind my back. They wanted to destroy my stability, my legacy, my identity. I sat alone in my office, staring at the papers in front of me. The numbers didn't lie. For months, they had been bleeding me dry, little by little, careful enough that I wouldn't notice right away. If I hadn't looked when I did, they might have succeeded. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe.
Anger threatened to consume me, but I reminded myself of the promise I had made the night I found those texts. I wouldn't be reckless. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. So I began collecting everything. Bank statements, screenshots of transfers, Chloe's careless text messages bragging about our plan. I backed up everything onto drives, printed copies, and stored them where neither of them could ever reach. Every time Ethan kissed me goodnight, every time Chloe laughed with me on the phone, I wanted to spit in their faces. But instead, I smiled, played along, and made them believe I was still the gullible Isabella they thought I was. In reality, I was already several steps ahead. I wasn't just dealing with cheaters. I, Isabella Carter, was dealing with thieves. And thieves always get caught. Once I had enough proof, I knew the time for quiet observation was over. It was time to act. But revenge, if rushed, could backfire, and I refused to give Ethan and Chloe even the slightest chance to twist the narrative. The first step was to protect myself. I visited my father's old attorney, a man I trusted more than anyone. Sitting in his office, I laid every file, every screenshot, every transfer slip. His face grew darker as he flipped through the pages. "Isabella," he said firmly, "this is more than infidelity. This is fraud, and it's enough to bury them both." Hearing those words gave me strength. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. Next, I contacted an independent auditor, someone with no ties to the company, no reason to protect Ethan. I handed him everything. "I want the truth laid bare," I told him. "No cover-ups, no favors." He promised me a full, unbiased report. But I didn't stop there. I started playing the role of the clueless wife. I pretended to be distant, withdrawn, almost fragile. Around Chloe, I acted defeated, telling her things like, "I'm not sure I can keep up with the company anymore," or "Maybe Ethan should handle more of the finances." She swallowed every word, her eyes lighting up with greed. "Don't worry, Izzy," she said, squeezing my hand. "We'll make sure you're taken care of." I smiled back, hiding the disgust boiling inside me. Behind the scenes, I tightened every screw. I closed loopholes in the accounts, secured my shares, and locked them out of any decision-making power. Each move was carefully timed so they wouldn't notice until it was too late. The final stage of my plan was simple: exposure. The upcoming shareholders meeting would be the perfect stage. Ethan would stand proudly before the board, convinced he was about to solidify his position. Instead, I would be waiting with undeniable evidence, proof of his betrayal, his theft, and Chloe's involvement. I rehearsed my words in the mirror at night, my reflection hardening with each practice. I thought about the moment their smug smiles would finally disappear, about the silence that would fall when the truth echoed through that room. I, Isabella Carter, wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to dismantle them both with precision. Revenge wasn't about rage anymore. It was about justice. And soon, justice would be mine. The shareholders' meeting room smelled of polished wood and recycled air, every neat edge a reminder of the empire Ethan had built on charm and numbers. He stood at the head of the table like a king about to accept another crown, all rehearsed smiles and confident slides. I watched him for a moment, feeling the cold steadiness that comes when a plan is finally ready to unfold. When he finished his opening remarks, the room broke into polite applause. That small burst of noise was the last applause he would enjoy for a long time. I stood, smoothing the blazer I'd chosen for the moment, something neutral, professional. I didn't need theatrics. I had binders. "Before we move to questions," I said, voice steady, "there are some documents the board needs to review." The hum in the room clipped like a record. Ethan's smile flickered. He thought I might be angry. He didn't think I had evidence. I handed a binder to the chairperson and watched faces turn from curiosity to shock as the first pages were flipped. The timeline was laid out clean and undeniable. Transfers with dates, annotated invoices, hotel reservations with matching credit card trails, and screenshots of texts where Chloe laughed about how easy it would be. I read the most damning messages aloud. Clear, calm, letting every word land like a strike. You could feel the energy shift. Conversations that had been cordial minutes before became a flurry of murmurs, phone checks, and whispered questions. An older board member swore under his breath. The chair leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "We'll need counsel," he said, voice clipped. "This requires immediate investigation."
Ethan's composure, so polished for so long, cracked in the way a sealed glass does when pressure finally wins. He sputtered excuses, accounting errors, clerical mistakes, an elaborate attempt to frame him. He reached for the practiced lines of denial he'd used on countless investors, but each defense landed on printed evidence that refused to be bent. Chloe sat white-faced, hands twisting in her lap, the mask of bravado she'd worn for months gone. Within an hour, the company's accounts were frozen and legal representatives had been called in. My attorney moved with practiced efficiency. The auditor confirmed what the binders suggested. I had expected resistance, perhaps fury, but the speed at which the board acted made it worse for them. This wasn't a scandal that would simmer. It was combustion. Ethan tried to make a scene afterward at home, throwing accusations and pleading in the same breath. "You betrayed me," he shouted at one point, voice raw. I looked at him, at the man who had shared my bed and stolen my family's trust, and felt none of the pity he hoped for. "I exposed the truth," I said quietly. "You built your lies into a house that could not stand." I watched him flinch as if my words were a physical blow. As the fallout spread, rumors online, discreet calls to former business partners, Chloe's name whispered in corners, I realized the final threads of my plan were falling into place. Yet even as the evidence's ripple effect strangled them, a small unease grazed me. Revenge had leveled their world, yes, but it had not healed me. There was still a final act to play, a closure I wanted beyond legal victory. For now, the unraveling had been precise and complete. Tomorrow, I would close the last loop. Morning light cut through the blinds like a judge's gavel, sharp, unforgiving. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat in the living room with bags under his eyes, scrolling through messages that only confirmed what I already knew. Partners distancing themselves, friends whispering, creditors calling. The man who had once walked into rooms and commanded attention looked smaller than the coffee table he'd slumped against. I came downstairs wearing the same calm I'd practiced in the mirror for weeks. In my hand was an envelope that felt heavier than any binder I'd carried, divorce papers, and a restraining order filing, every dotted line prepared so there'd be no wriggle room. The attorney had done what I asked, airtight, clinical, final. He looked up, voice hoarse. "Isabella, please, we can fix this. I'll pay it back. You can't fix what you chose to do," I said. My voice didn't shake. "You chose Chloe. You chose theft. You chose lies." I set the envelope on the coffee table and pushed it toward him. "Sign, or the court will handle it. Either way, it ends." For a moment he reached, as if to snatch at a last chance. Then he let his hand fall. Pride, I suppose, or the slow realization that his options were gone. He didn't fight. That was something I hadn't expected. The blank, hollow acceptance of a man who had nothing left to bargain with. After he left the house that afternoon to move into a cheap rental someone on his list of acquaintances reluctantly offered, I drove to Chloe's apartment. The place was half-packed. The kitchen cupboard's bare, the plush pillows gone from the couch. She opened the door with mascara-streaked cheeks and the guilty look of someone who'd been hunted. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, the words small and nearly ridiculous. "You meant to take everything," I said quietly. "You meant to erase me." I watched the color drain from her face, as if she'd finally seen herself in a mirror. She tried to explain, to apologize, but the words had no weight. I'd written down every message, every voice note, every plan she'd bragged about. Her regret felt performative, late. The lawsuits moved fast after that. Civil suits, criminal inquiries, subpoenas. The auditor's report became public within weeks, and the headlines did what whispers could not. They announced the fall. Ethan's name was on every front page for days. Chloe's social accounts were combed and archived by strangers who wanted proof of what they already suspected. But the legal victories were only part of it. I spent those months rebuilding the parts of my life the betrayal had tried to break. I rebalanced accounts, sat in long strategy meetings, and met every investor who'd been shaken. More importantly, I rebuilt trust, slowly, with family at my side, with professionals who became allies, not gatekeepers. There were nights I still woke up angry. There were days I missed the version of myself who had laughed easily and trusted without armor. But each time I thought of letting bitterness win, I remembered what I had done, not for spite, but to reclaim what was mine. In the end, Ethan and Chloe were left with each other and the ruins of what they'd made. Their fortune had dissolved into fees, fines, and the weight of public shame. I walked away with my name intact, Isabella Carter, bruised but uncompromised. Revenge, I learned, isn't fireworks. It's a ledger. It's patience and paperwork and the stubborn refusal to be erased. And when it's done right, the truth doesn't just punish, it restores.